timetable, which will be more relevant for me than for him, than for Rabbi Gitler over here. But we're talking about, just because it's like a weird thing, because normally when we think about Tanakh, we think about like Adam and the creation of the world through like, I don't know, maybe the destruction of the first temple and like Jeremiah. So like, that is not the planet we're talking about today. The Babylonian Empire fell, it was eaten by the Persian Empire, and that's fun because we're like right after Purim, so we're talking about Persia, and we're talking about Cyrus II, who is known as Cyrus the Great, and part of why he's known as Cyrus the Great is because as we will see momentarily, Tanakh loves this man, and part of why it is that actually, and he makes an appearance in Herodotus, Cyrus II.
What?
Herodotus, which is it's a history written by the Greeks about kind of their wars with the Persians, and there's like an oracle that about Cyrus that refers to him as a mule because he wasn't fully Persian, he was half Median, which turns out, right, because then you have like this vast empire of Persia and Media coming together through him, which like made him great, but the Persians were skeptical of him because he was halvesies, and we'll talk about how that I'll at least talk about how it gets reflected in the Cyrus cylinder.
Where is Medea?
I think it's east of where the Persian heartland is like southern and southern central Iran, and Medea is east of that, I believe.
So we decided that it would be fun to present like two kind of different approaches to Cyrus. So Rabbi Gitler will be presenting the like pro-Cyrus approach.
I'm presenting the correct approach.
And I'll be presenting.
She's much smarter, so she's got the more difficult approach.
Which is Cyrus gets too much credit. Okay, so maybe you say a little more about that.
So could you put at least in my mind?
Yeah.
So when was the destruction of the first temple?
586 BC.
586.
Yes.
And does this take into account? I know there's a difference between how Marc counts history versus the general world, but that's irrelevant to this.
That's according to everybody. That's the time on the this calendar, the secular calendar, is 586 BC.
586.
Somehow, when there was an attempt made to figure out how long the second temple stood for, there's a lot of gymnastics that are done as to how the first temple is destroyed in the year 586, and the second one is rebuilt in approximately the year 516, and somehow it lasts for 400 or so, 410 years, and somehow it's destroyed in the year 70. I don't know exactly how that happens,
Okay.
so I can't really answer that question. I said she's much smarter than I am, so maybe she can answer that question.
And you have Shimon Tzaddik living for like, many hundreds of years.
Yeah, there's a great difficulty in terms. It seems that the second temple stands for over 500 years, nearly 600 years, because it's rebuilt. Some of the texts, I don't know, we're going to look at them exactly, but we basically know when the second temple is rebuilt because it's in the third year of Darius or something, and that's we know exactly, we know pretty much when that is, what month of the year, what day of the year, we have that in the books of Haggai and Zechariah, and we have it in the book of Ezra, and so those we know those things, we know when those things happen. But where Cyrus comes in terms of Jewish history, so it's following the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. The Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar, and the Babylonians destroyed the first temple. And then in the year, I could get it incorrect, but I think in the year 539, the Persians conquer the Babylonians. And the Persian king is Cyrus. And Cyrus is known in history as Cyrus the Great. I don't know that if he himself called himself Cyrus the Great. He probably did, or he probably had other people call him Cyrus the Great. But Cyrus is, before we even just get into the Bible stuff, and I know the Rabbanit said it was part of the reason is because we call him Cyrus the Great, but Cyrus, according to many, really was great. Cyrus is seen, if you go on to like...
I'm Cyrus, king of the world, the great king.
Okay, so
Quite self-assertive.
well, he was self-assertive, but in his defense, he is seen as a major reformer. He is somebody who had incredible tolerance and even acceptance of other religions. We could question as to whether or not that was self-serving, or whether or not it was based upon the fact that he believed that this was correct. But either way, he was somebody who had a very whose empire was a very progressive empire. There are debates amongst historians, and I am not an ancient historian in any sense of the imagination, as to whether or not all of this, if Cyrus adopts all of these things and allows for a more permissive policy and freedom of religion, or if that was something that the Babylonians did also, and he sort of just fell his way into it. But certainly in many ways, Cyrus is truly great. I should say, so this is, first of all, thank Binyamin and Elizabeth and everybody who was involved in trying to make sure that we have this series. I work for 929 English. If you haven't been on the site, you should go on. There's all these great articles by Binyamin, and so many great ones to come from Rabbanit, Leah, and others. And we're a daily... He said... Listen, we're a daily digital, sort of like a daf yomi, 5 days a week, but it's a Tanakh yomi. We're currently in the middle of the book of Yirmiyahu, so if you weren't worried enough about COVID-19, and you want to see that the world sometimes got destroyed in the ancient world, but somehow we managed to survive it back then, and we'll survive it again. So we have a lot of just wonderfully interesting articles for people all over the Jewish world, and podcasts and small pieces, and just there's so we're in the book of Yirmiyahu. We've gone through the 5 books of the Torah and Joshua and Judges and Samuel, and there's just a lot of wonderful information on the site. And if you
have a live streaming class on it?
We don't. We had some Zoom classes recently with Erica Brown. She just released a book on Esther, and so she did some Zoom classes with us. So from time to time we have that, but most of it is just thousands and thousands of small articles, for 300 to 500 words, and small podcasts. Rabbi David Silber, if you know him, has done a lot, has basically done everything but Isaiah up to this point. I don't think he's going to do Yechezkel, Ezekiel either, but he's done, there's like a 7 to 10 minute podcast, and if you've ever studied with him, there's great stuff, and then there's just a lot of very interesting. So whether you have like a child's bar mitzvah and you want to look something up, or you always wanted to study whatever it might be, there's just a lot of very interesting materials on the site. But we also have lecture series, and so now we have a lecture series here in Chicago with y'all and all those people over there. And tonight, right, it's Unsung Heroes of the Tanakh, 3-part series. And so tonight we're talking about Cyrus. You may or may not know, I don't know how much news you read and how much evangelical news you read, but one of the reasons why this suggestion, at least in my mind, was made is that for many people in this country, and probably not so many in this city, but far south of this city, not the south side where the Jews used to live, very far south. Donald Trump, for many people, is a Cyrus figure. And I say that if you look on the top, we have a citation from Yeshaya, and I saw there were a couple of laughs and people, but if you go and you do it while I'm talking, or you can do it later, you Google it, and you will see, I can't tell you how many thousands of articles or suggestions or blog posts that are saying that. Listen to the way Yeshaya. Now Yeshaya, officially Yeshaya, according to traditional Orthodox belief, predates Cyrus the Great, and he really, really had to be great if he was alive during the days of Yeshaya, who lives in the 8th century, 7th century, 100 or so years prior to, we need the Bible professor, before the destruction of the first temple. And so he certainly is living before the Cyrus, who we say is leading the Persian army in their defeat of the Babylonians in the year 539. So that's part of the general biblical theory that there are 2, although there is a theory that there are in fact 3 different Isaiahs. So it would appear that this chapter 45 not the Isaiah who was living during the first temple period, because look at who he describes. I'll read in the Hebrew, and if anybody wants to read or has a question or anything else at any time, please. Ko amar Hashem lemishicho lechoresh asher hechazakti bimino lirad lifnei goyim umotnei melachim afateach liftoach lefanai delatayim usharim lo yisageru. So thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open for him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. And Yeshai goes on more there and talks about Cyrus. But listen to the way that Cyrus is spoken about. To the anointed, to the Mashiach, to the Messiah. Cyrus is seen as being the person who is anointed. Who are the Messiahs in Jewish history? So, right, who's the first Messiah? Moshe. Moshe is the first Messiah of the Jewish people. He's the one who redeems our people from Egypt. He doesn't get us all the way into Israel. And here we have, later on, yes, there is King Saul who is a Mashiach, he is anointed. And we have David who is anointed. And here we have another king who is anointed. We have King Cyrus, Koresh, who is being described here as being anointed by God. And it's really an amazing way to begin. I don't know what you're going to have to say, but Cyrus is anointed by God as being the person. And why is that? So if we look, I just have a couple of sources from you from the book of Ezra. Ezra lives after Cyrus. He's living generally, people say, 50, 70 years after, 100 years even after the building of the second temple. And so he's reflecting back historically as to what has happened earlier. So he is not living at the same time as Cyrus, but he gives the history of what happened. Anybody want to read? I know that you went to school, and many of your parents probably paid for you to go to school. So, anybody? Okay. Thank you.
Hebrew English.
Whatever you want.
In the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, in order that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia, so that he sent a herald throughout all his kingdom, and also a written edict declared. Thus says King Cyrus of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem and Judah. Any of those among you who are his people, may their God be with them, are now permitted to go up to Jerusalem and Judah and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. Let all the survivors, whatever place they reside, be assisted by the people of their place with silver and gold, with goods and with animals, besides freewill offerings for the house of God in Jerusalem.
So this is amazing, right? In the year 586, the Jews are decimated. Jerusalem is decimated. Tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands are killed, sent into slavery. The temple is destroyed. And here we are. It's about 55 years later. And here we have a king of the entire world, as was read, and we'll read in a second, who is declaring to the Jews that they can go back and they can rebuild the temple, that there will be gold and silver for them, and they can go home and they can build a temple. And so Isaiah's description of him as being the anointed of God, the savior of the Jewish people, is really an appropriate description of who and what he is. Look at what he's able to do. Now, we can debate, I wouldn't say the veracity, but I would say the description given here by Ezra of Cyrus's, of what Cyrus says. And if to understand that, let's just turn to the next page. So on the next page,
this is being said by Yirmiyahu. This is not just Cyrus saying this.
No, this is Ezra. This is in the book of Ezra.
Yeah, but Yirmiyahu, I mean, he's saying, I have good
okay, yeah.
He's saying this is not Cyrus's
So this is not
PR department. This is a Jewish source.
Correct.
Wait, sorry. Just to be clear, Yirmiyahu is not the one speaking here. The description is that it's a fulfillment of the prophecy of Yirmiyahu.
Yeah, okay.
But Cyrus is speaking.
No, this is Ezra.
No.
Right, but then the person being quoted
It
is
says
Cyrus.
there's a written edict declared. So that written edict is by Cyrus. Yeah. So it is.
I understand that, but it's by the word of the Lord by the mouth of Yirmiyahu. So Yirmiyahu.
Yirmiyahu
He's
is the
not
one
saying
who
that.
prophesies in,
Yeah.
is it chapter 29 or something, where he says that there will be 70 years of exile, and so it's working out that this is making sense with the prophecy that Yirmiyahu gives. So I believe that's the Jeremiah reference in there. So the reason why I said we can't doubt the veracity of this of what Ezra is saying here, but we can question the complete description. If you look on the second page, in the middle of the second page, I have a little picture there, and if you want to see it in 15 different shades of color based upon what color your picture was taken, it's something called the Cyrus cylinder. Has anybody here been in the British Museum or have plans in 6 months from now, because nobody's going the next month or two, of going to London? If anybody's going to London anytime soon, one of the great places to go in London is the British Museum. Probably the most famous thing in the British Museum is, I don't know, the Rosetta Stone, or the Elgin Marbles in the British Museum, and another one of what? King Tut's. So one of the other amazing things that is in the British Museum is something called the Cyrus cylinder. And it is this little clay tablet with writing that you see on your page. And like I said, if you want to see it, there are, 80,000 images of it on Google or something of that sort, What'd you say? It's only 6 images and, that are on 80 different websites, but it is a cylinder, and it was a message that was sent out. If you look here, it says the size is 23 centimeters long, 11 centimeters wide. It has 40 lines of writing. It's dated from the year 539 BCE. And that is the year in which Cyrus and his armies conquered the Babylonians. And this is a cylinder that was brought to the British Museum sometime in the 19th century. Do you remember? Sometime in the 19th century, and as I'm sure you can imagine, there are no plans to return it to Iran anytime soon. And so if you look on the left, if you can read it in the left, then you should definitely be giving the class rather than sitting here and listening here or online. But on the right, it talks his troops from the quarters of the world, a weakling was established, ruler over them, and he's talking at this point about the previous king. Okay? A command dishonoring them, and he's talking about what? So, he's talking about the previous kings who came before him. That's what he's talking about. If you look in the middle of the next page, for example, that's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's start from like 8 boxes down. To his city, Babylon, he caused him to go. He made him take road to Babylon, going as a friend and companion aside, his numerous troops in unknown numbers, right, going down all the people of Babylon, okay, and then start on the bottom. So he's talking about the kings who were in Babylon before him. And now, however, he's going to start talking about the important parts. I am Cyrus, king of the world, the great king, the powerful king of Babylon, king of Sumer and Akkad, king of the 4 quarters of the world. Son of Cambius, the great king, king of the city of Anshe, grandson of Cyrus, the great king, so that was the Cyrus the first, the king of the city of Anshe, great grandson of Thespius, the great It's the best way to be king if your father was king before you. Eternal seed of royalty, whose ruled Bel, and if your grandfather was king before you, it's even better. And Nabu love, whose administration they rejoice in their heart, who's made my triumphal entrance into Babylon. I took up my lordly residence, the royal palace, with and rejoicing Marduk, the great lord, moved the noble, thank you, heart of the residents of Babylon to me, while I gave, I should pull up my document to read better to you.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. If you
Just translate.
I think it's my attention.
So I'm going to pull up to see if I have it here on my phone what I had sent, and this way I can read it a little better. But if not, it's okay. The point being is, if you read down in here, what he does in this document, while you can just read while I'm speaking, is he talks about restoring people coming back and restoring the gods that were prohibited by the Babylonians. He's telling them, right? These gods were angry by the command of Marduk, the great laws. I caused them to take up dwelling in their residence. He's allowing people to practice their religions that were prohibited previously. So if we look in the book of Ezra, so there's like this great debate about how do we look at Ezra. So the majority of let's just say Jews, look at Ezra and say, what Ezra is saying is correct, and the Cyrus cylinder is proof. Yes, it was not just the Jews who got this cylinder sent to them, allowing them, perhaps even, what's the word that I'm looking for? Recommending, encouraging them, offering help and assistance to have them rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. It was sent out to people all over, his empire, and it was the largest empire in history at its time. And Cyrus there may have been 200 cylinders that were sent out like this. That one of them survives is amazing. I don't think there's, if there were 200 and one of them survives, that the most likelihood is that all 200 would have been destroyed. So there's one that survived. And so Ezra may have tailored his message somewhat to make Cyrus look, or perhaps that was the message that was sent to the Jews, that it made their God look like the only God. But irrespective of whether that's the fact, what we see from the cylinder is the fact that Cyrus allowed people, and allowed, for our sake, the Jews, to return to Jerusalem, encouraged them to do so, gave money to them to help them in the building of the temple. And therefore he is, according to Isaiah, who knows exactly when that was written, he is the anointed. He is the person who has brought back the Jews. Now, you may very well know that not so many Jews did go back to build the second temple. And there were, there are debates. The number Ezra gives is about 42,000 Jews. There are accounts that say it was in the 30,000. That the wealthy stayed behind. Those who didn't have too much were the ones who went back. It did take them time, which maybe is more of what you're going to talk about. They didn't build it right away. They were not the wealthiest of communities. There were certain issues that came up. But like anything else in life, things take time. It doesn't happen all in one day, in one moment, right? I was here, I said 15 years ago, the floor didn't look as nice, the walls didn't look as nice. I don't know the black stuff that you were talking about, if it was here in greater degree back then. But the Cyrus, it's an amazing story of a king, of a person who recognizes that the Jews have this right to have this temple. And think of the reversal of fortune. Right? If we think, it's not the same thing, but in our day, right? If this is almost like whomever it was that conquered the Nazis, and again, I'm exaggerating the point, so it's not the same thing, then said to the Jews, I now give you back your country of Israel and your city of Jerusalem, and here is money for you, tax money for you to go back and to re-inhabit your land and build back your temple, because that's what happens. Right? We know in our tradition, we just passed Purim, for example, right? Okay, we don't have to talk too much about Vashti, but according to tradition, right, Vashti is the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, and she's so horrible, and she's so horrid, and all these other things, without getting to that debate. But why is she's presented that way, as being this, she has to be this horrific person, because she is the granddaughter of the person who led the destruction, the ravaging, the horrific ravaging death and destruction of Jerusalem. And then here we have imagine just years later, the king who has displaced that dynasty and those people and is the most important person in the world is now willing to have the Jews return to Israel and is willing to have them build a temple. So I know that the title was sort of the Unsung Heroes of the Tanakh. I think that Cyrus is very much a very great hero in the Tanakh. The only reason that he's unsung is because people never get to these parts. They don't read Ezra. I don't know how far deep they get it in Yeshaya. That's okay. I know there are a lot of haftorahs from Yeshaya. And again, if you're reading evangelical newspapers today, you'll see that our president is described in similar ways. He's called in many ways like a Cyrus by the evangelicals. And again, take it or leave it. It doesn't matter what your politics are in there. But he's really a great person, and if you even just spend a few minutes online looking at the way that he is described in terms of his policies, not just vis-a-vis the Jews, but vis-a-vis just others generally, he is certainly no mule. And he is a person of great renown all of these years later. I think that stuff that came out, writings from Cyrus and from his court, were influential upon founding fathers of our country, and still our country being the United States of America, and many others today. So I will leave it to the Rabbanit to put me in my place.
Yeah, so the Shah of Iran, what?
Could we ask?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Him.
Yeah, better if you ask her.
A cylinder, then they also have like tablets. Why would they get that cylinder? Did they have clay tablets?
I mean, they had clay tablets and stuff of that sort also. I don't know why this was written on a cylinder. It may have been for transportation reasons. And it appears that these were sent out to different places. So a tablet maybe was not the optimal way. I imagine their tablets, what?
No, you could roll it
You can
out.
print,
Maybe,
like
yeah,
print ink, and then you can roll it.
Guys know
Or
what
not,
I'm
or onto clay.
But it also is a lot easier to carry that than a big slab.
Yeah.
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 And I'm sure there's stuff, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not a historian of the period.
Did they all go on these cylinders?
There were cylinders, and people wrote on tablets also, and all sorts of different
Well, I
things.
think I've seen one somewhere, I think in a museum in Israel somewhere. This was in Israel, well, I think in the museum they had.
I'm sure they
Back
did.
in the time of the Bible, yeah.
That's what this time is, so yeah, 100%.
Look at it.
They don't have this cylinder, but,
Well, they had stamps, like ring stamps, they had things on display. One of the history museum in Israel.
That is wrong.
Now,
another place to go in 6 months from now. Don't go now.
Don't go down.
Yes.
Aaron, what did you have?
What were like some of the political reasons he might have been so generous? I mean, was it just to build a contrast to the Babylonians? Was there, who was in Jerusalem after we were exiled that maybe he wanted to, he wanted to change the regime? Or is he was just a great Zionist?
I think that according to, again, and this is more historical questions, and there are debates about it, it seems from the cylinder that this was not a policy just for the Jews. And this was a policy that was for all or everybody or, minorities of the time. And his foreign policy was one that was smarter to allow freedom of religion. And I'll just accept my taxes, and I won't have to deal with people's rebellions because they think that their God is the greatest. He's the God of all. He's the greatest of all. He's Cyrus the Great. He's the king of all. And I'd rather just collect taxes and not have trouble. And one of the ways of doing it in a world where everything is about gods, which is what the world was for thousands of years, well, I don't know that it still is anymore, but we may believe it is, but that's not on the street what most people believe. I just think it's a very smart, so I don't know if he's doing it, I don't know if he's Machiavellian or he's benevolent, that I can't tell you, but he has, and again, there is this historical debate as to whether or not that was generally the Babylonian policy. We don't think of it that way because we think of the Babylonians as these great destroyers of Jerusalem, but things are always more complex. What?
It wasn't Babylonian, it was Madi-Persian.
No, he's not. He's not, right. We think the Babylonians were the ones who are destroying all of the religions because they destroyed Jerusalem. So this next guy who takes over and allows Jerusalem, he's saying, well, that was that. My policy is going to be allow everybody to keep their God. So but we don't know 100% if that's the case. That's I think the majority of historians, but there is debate. Yes?
So, I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but fact, fiction, shot, midrash, Queen Esther and Ahasuerus, were they his parents?
No, we'll get to that, hold on.
Okay, sorry.
So So let's let Rabbanit, I don't know if that, and then we can maybe come back to that, and there is, there's you're going to present the Midrashic, something about that, you may present what the more normative viewpoint is today about that also.
But hold on, Carly, that's source number 3. So we're flipping over to my sheets. Just like a more skeptical read on the Cyrus cylinder is that the Cyrus cylinder, including this like ancient translation that you provided, is
and is an ancient clay cylinder now broken into several pieces.
That's okay.
The Cyrus cylinder was presented as like a founding document to the UN by the Shah of Iran, who was trying to show his own lineage and how all of these like human rights and religious freedoms and whatever, like this is like where we come from here in Persia, so you can judge for yourself how successful that was. Anyway,
so the Shah fashioned himself as a Cyrus.
Right, exactly. The Shah very much fashioned himself as a Cyrus, and then nowadays scholars like more modern translations of this that also really see it as exactly kind of how you ended up of Cyrus trying to consolidate power and really put down the people who would come before him and be like, and I'm really awesome, and you should all like be okay with my rule. Okay, so as we saw, the book of Ezra begins with this story about Cyrus being like, yes, go to Jerusalem, and by the way, here's all the stuff that Nebuchadnezzar pillaged from the temple, like take it with you, go. And so what happens when they get there and they kind of start building is, we can look at source number 1 from Ezra 4, what?
Turn the camera, it's on you.
Oh, they can see me, I think.
Not on me.
I think I'm in there also.
You're in there, good? Okay.
So the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the returned exiles were building a temple, and they go to Zerubbabel and the chiefs of the clans, and they say, oh, like, we want to join you. And they're all like, and the Jewish chiefs are like, this is a terrible idea, absolutely not. They say, it's not for you and us to build a house of the Lord, we alone will build it. The Yachad here means the opposite of what it normally means. There's like a lot of commentary about that, but we're gonna jump right over it. But here it means alone. In accord with the charge that King Cyrus of Persia laid on us. So then they go and so they attempted to undermine the resolve of the people of Judah, and so they bribed the ministers in order to thwart their plans all the years of King Cyrus of Persia and until the reign of King Darius of Persia. So basically, King Cyrus is like, yeah, go do your thing. But the minute that people come back with bribes saying, King Cyrus, we don't think these people should really be allowed to build their temple. The temple doesn't happen. The bribes work. And everything is put on hold. So yeah, we want to say like Cyrus is so great, but the minute it's like maybe lucrative to go the other direction or to hold back, the temple does not get built at all under King Cyrus. And you could say, well, it didn't get built in part because the people who went with Zerubbabel in that first return were these really Nebuch people who weren't very good at building and were primarily, meaning by the time Ezra gets there, which we'll see in a little while, everyone's intermarried, that whole first group of people who came back, they're all whatever. But so it could be that this is their telling of it, that they're like, oh yes, Cyrus told us we can't build, we're done. But there was maybe something else going on, or it was actually the politics of it. So now we move on.
Right, and that comes back to sort of when Aaron was asking, right, there is this local population who...
They're not into it.
At first they want to help the Jews build, but the Jews say, we want to do it without you.
Right, well, they start out being described as the adversaries of, right? That's our writing.
That's
us, right?
We'll say no.
Right.
They want to help us build, and we're like, if we were going to be the we, we're like, no, we don't want your help, this is upon us to do it.
Right.
But they knew that we were going to say that.
Possibly.
You know.
But it depends like how much you want to psychoanalyze the author of the text.
And this chapter is cited by AIPAC all the time. You know, you have to find your, ministers to go to the government and to...
Right. Well, so here we have chapter 5. Fast forward, we're now in the days of Darius. So in the days of Darius, Cyrus died, Darius now. In the days of Darius, you have now these prophets who are there, Haggai and Zechariah, and they say, you know what, like Cyrus told us we could build, God wants us to build, we're prophesying, God wants us to build, let's do it. But you don't have Jewish authority in the land. So you have this guy named Tatanai, who's the governor of the province, and his fellow Shatar Bozanai and their colleagues. And so they are, these are non-Jews who are politically in charge, who go to the people who are now trying to rebuild with this prophetic guidance and say, who told you you're allowed to do this? You're not allowed to build, go home. So they said to them, no, actually, please send a letter back to the king because we have permission from Cyrus. So Darius, that's the chapter 5 part that Rabbi Gitler brought you here, by the way. I don't think we even looked at it. But this then Darius goes back and does research and finds that Cyrus had in fact decreed that this had happened. So even though Cyrus didn't follow through, the decree had in fact existed. And then Darius goes kind of above and beyond and sends back more money and more power and says, yes, I've listened to these guys and I support them. And only under the rule of Darius is the temple actually then built. So you can go down, it's in the Hebrew, I gave it to you, but it's not Hebrew, it's in Aramaic. So and it's biblical Aramaic, which to me is harder than Talmudic Aramaic. So we're going to read in English. They don't teach it to you in day school. So the elders of the Jews progressed in the building, urged on by the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, and they brought the building to completion under the aegis of the God of Israel by the order of Cyrus and Darius and King Artaxerxes, who we're going to talk about in a second, of Persia. The house was finished on the 3rd of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius. So yes, we're still giving credit to Cyrus, but Cyrus didn't follow through. Who does follow through? Actually Darius. And the rabbis of the Midrash know that Darius is the real deal. Because who is Darius, the son of Esther? So that's source number 3. Yes. So you were right, but you were interpreting the Midrash to be on his team, but I brought you the Midrash, so you can't. But here we get, it's interesting. It's interesting because that prophecy of Persia is a mule in Vayikra Rabbah gets reinterpreted into Persia is a hare. Persia is a shafan. It's great. Okay, so Rabbanit, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Simon, Rabbanan Amrei, Ma Hashafan Hazah Yeshbo Simanei Tuma v'Simanei Tahara. So look at this hair. It has some signs of purity and some signs of impurity. Meaning, for animals, there are signs of kashrut, right? Split hooves, chews its cud. So the hair does not have split hooves, but it does chew its cud. So it has its halvesies, right? And so they say, so too was Medea, but it comes from a tzaddik and a rasha. But then, it's not one's Median, one's Persian. It's who's the tzaddik and the rasha. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Simon, Daryavish ha'acharon b'na shel Esther haya tahor me'imo v'tameh me'aviv. Right, Darius was the child of Esther. He was pure on his mother's side and impure on his father's side. So it's just an amazing kind of play with this all of this mixed breeding that represents Persia in so many different places. Also in our very own text, and you have Queen Esther being someone who participates in this mixing, but it turns out well because he's the one who ultimately, right? It's a terrible text for talking about intermarriage, by the way. But if you do intermarry, you might have a child who gives permission to the Jews.
It's good for matrilineal descent.
It's what?
It's good for matrilineal descent.
Yeah, exactly, right?
So, is this saying, are they trying to impugn Darius, saying, well,
No, I think it's a leg up, meaning otherwise you would have thought Darius was just a Gentile. And you were saying, no, Darius, he's the
But he says-
child of Esther.
oh, so he had signs of impurity and signs of purity, but that didn't play out in him?
No, the purity plays out in him,
Oh,
and that's why
and
he
the
gives
purity was
permission.
He gives permission to the
The
Jews.
last.
There's like encourages, right? Like it's
Darius is like-
because technically the permission.
Right, the permission comes from Cyrus,
But then there's
but
like-
Darius reignites it
Yeah.
and actually brings it into
And
habit.
the temple is built during the reign of Darius.
Darius, exactly.
Wait, so what's the relationship between Cyrus and his?
Darius is his son.
But then this
That doesn't
this
make
is the
sense
same
then.
series.
Oh, grandson. Oh yeah, grandson.
And
So then-
Xerxes. How could you forget that?
No, he's
No,
not yet.
Darius is
He
the
hasn't
son.
yet.
He's the son.
Okay, the whole, okay, if you try and map on what we know, like, from history of our committed and how it plays out in this midrash, but also in like texts in general, like it doesn't make sense at all.
Okay.
And I think the rabbis kind of know that, and I think this text actually reflects it. Because in the book of Ezra, the person, like, there's an Achashverosh who exists, and he's after Darius. So the whole thing is like. And so the timeline, it's very hard to justify the timeline. If you look at the Dat Mikra version of Ezra and Nehemiah, they'll say like, in Muktam Me'ochar Torah, like there's no early and late in the Torah, like don't try and expect this to like make full chronological sense, and like here's why this part is here and that part is there, and blah blah blah. So it's
The interesting new argument about Purim is that Achashverosh actually lives when the second Beis Hamikdash is already built.
Yeah.
And
Who
so
does?
Achashverosh and thus Mordechai and Esther and those Jews are living in Persia, and the whole book
when
is
they could have
about
been living.
they should be living in Israel.
Yeah.
And so, right, and Shushan and the palace is the replacement for the Beit Hamikdash, and so that's the
Yeah.
right. So that totally
It flips-
changes the story and the dynamics of the story from the.
As a college student in Israel, I heard that many times from religious Zionists.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
are you like, what are you doing? Like, you're, you know.
But then but it's complicated, right? But because the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud is written in the exile, so the Talmud like tries to say, no, like Kiblu of Purim, that's like when the Jews actually decided to keep the Torah. And where did that happen? In Babel. Like right? So it's like it's complicated.
So on your timeline here, I'm confused.
You should be.
So the Darius who built is not Darius 1,
It is Darius.
Oh, sorry.
but it shows him being
There's a missing king in between there.
older than Ahasuerus. I mean, I thought he was the son of Ahasuerus.
He's not. Not according to history. But yes, according to this midrash, which does not line up with the timeline of the book of Ezra.
Darius was just his son. Yeah, we're not
Okay, we're gonna move on from this point. I think we've rehashed it like 3 or 4 times now. It doesn't make sense. Let's keep going.
The timeline as to who is who is who is very difficult to decipher. There are a variety of different texts that seem to say different things.
Yes.
So it's a difficult thing to answer.
Yes. It can't be answered. Meaning, what we normally say is that like midrash does not need to accord with history, and that what they're trying to say is that like the way I'm reading it is that the midrash knows that for the purposes of this argument that I'm trying to construct, that Darius is the real deal. And so, like, in order to make Darius the real deal, oh, he's the son of Esther. Like, how do we get? He's the one who gave permission for the temple to be rebuilt. Like, what an awesome dude. But even so, even with Darius, and I want to like move towards the end here, but even with Darius, and we have this rebuilding of the temple, we actually still don't have political authority in Eretz Israel until you have a king by the name of Achashverosh, who may or may not be Achashverosh, who comes after Darius, and then you have Artaxerxes. So then you have Artaxerxes, who some people say he's also Achashverosh. And if you want to say that Nehemiah and Mordechai are the same person, which some people also, like the Talmud might also be interested in saying, then you have to say that Achashverosh is Artaxerxes. Which again, it's like, well, like, Like, I think, right, it's just a further evidence that, like, the Talmud, it's not like the Talmud didn't have these books. Like, they have these books. We say parts of Nehemiah and davening every day, right? Like, it's just that, like, they also don't know how the timeline matches up and are just trying to make meaning out of it, which I think is, like, the correct move. I don't know, it's my mind. That's the correct move. Anyway, so now we have Artaxerxes, and Ezra is alive in the times of Artaxerxes. Ezra did not go up with the first, I don't know, the Chalutzim, right, with Zerubbabel, like that. He did not go up with the first crew.
During Cyrus.
What?
He did not.
He did not.
Ezra
This later Darius, yeah.
No, he's even later. Ezra's even later. So, I mean, you could say maybe he wasn't alive then, blah, blah, whatever. Okay, fine. So you have we're in the reign of Artaxerxes, we're in Ezra chapter 7, and you have Ezra who's a Kohen, and I cut out some of his long lineage, but he traces back, he's the Kohen, he traces back to Aaron the priest. And he tells you about Pinchas to Eleazar to Aaron. Fine. What? Yeah, well, I'm waiting for your version of this lineage.
He had the gene, for sure. He for sure had the gene.
But here's the difference between Ezra and all these other people. So we know that you already have Haggai and Zechariah in Eretz Yisrael, and you know that they're prophesying. But Ezra, he is a scribe. He's an expert in the teachings of Moses. I'm in verse 6 now, which the Lord God of Israel had given, whose request the king had granted in its entirety. Right. So Ezra, he's a scribe. He's an expert in the Torah, and he's a political leader of the Jewish community in Persia. And then he goes to the king and says, here's my list of requests. And the king grants, Artaxerxes grants all of them, thanks to the benevolence of the Lord towards Ezra. So then he gathers all these people, and now in the first Aliyah, let's say, everyone's like the child of this slave servant, blah blah blah. It's a very lowly. And here we have the priests, the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, the temple servants. Here, Ezra's Aliyah is the fancy nefesh b'nefesh flight. He's going with all the cool kids, and they go on this journey together. And here now, but really over and over again, who is Ezra? So verse 10, Ezra had dedicated himself to study the teaching of the Lord so as to observe it and to teach the laws and the rules to Israel. And here we have a text which King Artaxerxes gave to Ezra, a scholar in matters concerning the commandments of the Lord and his laws of Israel. Okay. So first of all, you can go and anyone can go with you. That's verse 13. And 14, for you are commissioned by the king and his 7 advisors to regulate Judah and Jerusalem according to the law of your God, which is in your care. So you are not just some guy I like who has some demands. You're now in charge, and you can set up a little theocracy in this land, right? According to Torah Moshe. So you now have not just. We have the Beit HaMikdash by now is already built, but you don't have any political power. And we saw they had to go ask the Tatanai, who then has to go ask Darius, can they do it? And Darius sends back, and then Tatanai says yes. And then anytime they have resources, they have to go back to him. And here they're none of that. You're in charge now, and here's all these resources for you. And everyone who's there who works for the government who has more resources, here's how much you can collect from them every year. And by the way, you're tax exempt, which is really nice. Right? There's so many fun things that happen in here. That's verse 24. We further advise you that you being the people who they might meet along the way, it is not permissible to impose tribute, poll tax, or land tax on any priest, Levite, singer, gatekeeper, temple servant, or any other servant of this house of God.
I didn't know U.S. law had biblical sources.
Yes, seriously, it's amazing.
Wow.
And then and so not only is Ezra and all of his priestly buddies tax exempt, but Levitical buddies tax exempt, but they then have the right to appoint judges. So that's verse 25. By the divine wisdom you possess, appoint magistrates and judges to judge all the people in the province of beyond the river, who know the laws of your God, and who teach those who do not know them, that anyone who does not obey the Lord of your God and the law of the king be punished with dispatch, whether by death, corporal punishment, confiscation of possessions, or imprisonment. So he really, that's really pretty significant power. Oh, we missed the part before, sorry, we skipped a great line. I don't know if they're going to be able to find it quickly. Oh, here. If someone gets it, Darius said, just while we're talking about corporal power, go back to verse number 2. Source number 2, verse 11. in chapter 6, so it's 2b11. Sorry. I also issue an order that whoever alters this decree shall have a beam removed from his house, and he shall be impaled on it, and his house confiscated. A little inclined to a parent, though. But like these people are like they're adding teeth slowly, which Cyrus actually never did, right? Cyrus doesn't have any teeth, and therefore it's really easy for people to get in the way. So right, it's a little bit like violent, but also like that's exactly what we just did to Haman like yesterday, and we cheered about it, so whatever. Right, so we have just like this growth and growth and growth post-Cyrus. So Cyrus might have like kicked it off, but then Cyrus himself got back in the way. But you could say like he set a good example for the people who would come after him, which then gets called upon. But I would say like the real doers are the Darius and Artaxerxes, and you might even want to say better, the real doers are Haggai and Zechariah, who said, you know what, like nothing's happening here, and like time to just like put some facts on the ground and start building this Beit HaMikdash. And that then prompted the permission from Darius and Ezra, who was like powerful enough to be able to go and get the permission to establish political authority, that they might be kind of the real heroes. Okay.
Any questions? So I think, you know, if you're a little lost, which you may be, you should go back, you can go back and read those books and all that, but right, just like a biographical, right? So about the year 539, Cyrus takes over as king. He doesn't do that, pleasantly. And
he said it was so pleasant.
Well, but he takes over king, but it didn't affect the Jewish people. He
then affects the Jewish people by allowing them to return to Jerusalem. There are Jews who go back. They start to build their temple, or they're ready to build their temple, but then they get into this political fight with their local enemies, and it gets delayed for a good 16 or 17 years, and then permission is once again granted in the days of Darius, who Darius is, we'll leave out for now, who his mother is, who his father is, etc. But then they get permission again, and then about 4 or 5 years later, they do complete the temple. The person who is the main political person, just in terms of the history at the time when the second temple is rebuilt, is Zerubbabel, who the Rabbanit mentioned. Just so you should know, Zerubbabel is a direct descendant of King David. Right, when you sang in Korah on Hanukkah months ago, King Zerubbabel, he's supposed to represent the end of Babylon and the coming back. And in fact, in the books of Haggai and Zechariah, I believe in both of the books, they talk about how if the Jews follow the Torah properly and return en masse and build the Beit HaMikdash and things, then Zerubbabel will not just be a local, he's described as I believe the word is a patat or pitate, he's like a local pasha, that he will become a king just like his grandparents and great-grandparents before him. That doesn't happen. The Jews don't follow through, and that doesn't ever happen that he and his descendants become kings of Israel in the way that David and Shlomo, and we'll leave out the bad guys, so we'll say, Chizkiah and Yoshiyahu are kings of the great kingdom of Judea and of Israel. But this all begins with the anointed one, Cyrus. He is the anointed one. He's the one who gives back, he gives permission. It's not just simply a Balfour Declaration. It is so much more than just that. They went, if you go look on the BBC, they interviewed like Balfour's grandchildren and what they think about it, 100 years later. And Cyrus, I think, just to, we're talking about Cyrus, I think that in the 21st century, when we think about him, and yes, he's written in certain ways by certain people, but to think about him and whether or not the Shah was creating and trying to say that he is like Cyrus, seeing somebody who way back when gave permission to the Jews and permission to others to rebuild their temples and led what is considered for his time a very progressive regime is really an amazing thing. And so he deserves his name, Cyrus the Great, whether it was given to him or whether it's others who decided that, the ones who were writing the scroll in the cylinder, who said, it's good for job security to call you Cyrus the Great.
All right, I feel like I don't have like anything to add other than what I've said already, which is that redemption takes a lot of people, and it's nice to like pin it on, Cyrus the Great. But even if you want to stay in the world of Achaemenid, how do you say? Achaemenid, thank you. Achaemenid, it teaches us stuff for Achaemenid kings. Even then, it's not so clear that Cyrus was the real doer. But I would also say, like, a lot of it had to come from there being like the right Jews using power in the right ways, the right time, and all with the support of Kadosh Baruch Hu, which I think Ezra does a great job of doing.
Yeah, and there's a piece of that also as well in those books where the Jews are very reluctant to build the second temple. They are poverty-stricken, and part of the message of Haggai and Zechariah is like a Phil Knight, and they certainly didn't have his money, sort of message where they just basically say, just do it. They say, like, go up to the hill and just grab some wood and we're going to build the temple. And one of the staggering verses is a verse where the temple is built, and it says that they don't know if the people are crying or laughing or joyous, and there's people who are joyous, and there are other people who are crying, like they think the elders are crying because they're seeing this temple that's built, and they're saying, what is this little nothing? The temple that was destroyed was this, marble. It was like the Four Seasons, and now we built like the Motel 6. Now, if you have Motel 6, good for you. But that's like, sort of, there ain't no mavchin, they can't tell the difference. And so there are a lot of issues that are going on here at that time, and but there is this mentality that you need all the right people to start it up. Cyrus the Great, Darius the Great, the little temple, these, that, and the other things. So if you haven't read them, the book of Ezra is fascinating, and the books of Haggai and Zechariah are fascinating. It may still be Shushan Purim in Hawaii. So if you're going to, improve your, want to think about it at that time, and sort of like where the book of Esther fits into all of these narratives and all of these questions.
Right, well, yes, greatly.
Yeah, do people have questions?
Yeah, Aaron.
When did things really turn south, aside from the 9th of Av? It seems like things are pretty great right here. We've got, you're told that, we can kind of govern our own land. I know at some point the Romans took over, right?
First the Greeks. Greeks,
and then Romans. When do things kind of really go south?
I think that
it depends who you are, right? Like if you're the rabbis, then you think it's the Hasmoneans, and you think that the consolidation of power between, which by the way is funny because they love Ezra and he is a priest with political power, but the rabbis don't love the Hasmoneans who consolidated power between the priestship and kingship, and you have the corruption of the temple that then happens, but even before already under the Greeks, because the Greeks took a kind of softer approach and said we're really awesome, come do our thing with us, and then you have intermarriage. But you have intermarriage from the beginning, meaning 80% of the book of Nehemiah is about intermarriage and how terrible it is, and how he and Ezra railed against it together. So the question is what is good, what is bad, who gets to weave the story. The Second Temple stood for a relatively long time, meaning 500-ish years. So, and you have a lot of different stuff going on. You have the Persian period of it, and you have the Greek period of it, and you eventually get to the Romans.
Right, and we don't have such great autonomy. There's a very, very limited sort of autonomy that's been given later. At different times we grab more of it, but when we grab more of it, when there's a Cyrus the Great and there's an Alexander the Great, there's a reason why he called himself that from Cyrus, right? There's only so much autonomy that one has. And so the Second Temple, and I think that, coming back to sort of what we said before, when Haggai and Zechariah are saying to Zerubbabel, if the Jews listen and if everything turns out, then I will turn over these kingdoms and you will be the great king, it never happens. Ezra has his limited political autonomy in Nehemiah, and they're able to tell the Jews to get rid of their Gentile wives, and but it's always the Second Temple period is definitely a period of more that's more fraught, and we don't
know all that much about.
right, and there are questions as to what we know and what we don't know and what's. Right. I mean, we have stuff later afterwards. A lot of the history is written later. Josephus, right, writes later. Josephus writes about Cyrus also. Josephus may know Cyrus as well as we know George Washington, or our great grandparents on the Mayflower or whatever. I'm sure that.
Yeah, and then the other difference between the Second Temple and the First Temple is just that we have way more archaeological evidence. Like we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we have books that were preserved that are not from Tanakh. I mean, Tanakh ends with Divrei Yamim, but the end of prophecy is like Malachi, which is not very long after this, kind of within the timeline of Tanakh. So then we have all of these books that didn't make it, like the Apocrypha, that were mostly preserved, even books in the Apocrypha that we're sure were originally in Hebrew, like the Book of Maccabees. We don't have those books anymore in the original Hebrew, even though it's clear that they were written by Jews, for example. So we can look to the Apocrypha, and we can look to stuff from surrounding areas, like there was a large Jewish community in Egypt that was kind of always there, and we have stuff from that. But putting together what that whole picture is of those 500 years of what Jewish life looked like in the Second Temple is
Right, and the rabbinic approach is very much that the Second Temple is not the first temple, right? There's this idea that the items that are missing in the Second Temple, the fire's not coming down, and we don't have the Aron, right? And so that. I think that is less about whether those actual objects or miracles were there, and it's just more saying this was built and it was the center of Jewish life and it was great, but it never became what it was supposed to be. And there are debates amongst, fascinating debates amongst people about how to read that in religiously in terms of Jewish history. Like Hirsch has this fascinating approach to the Second Temple and what it is and how that's supposed to keep us going, but that's something to look on your own. So I don't know if things were ever that far north that they had to descend that far south.
Yeah, I mean, and rabbinic Judaism would say from that south emerged the rabbis, and with all of our order and our texts and our this. And,
started by Ezra as the
and the Ur rabbi, kind of minus Moses, whatever. Right, as the scribe, right? Ezra as the founder of Jewish written culture, which definitely.
Ezra's the person of the book, outside of Moses.
So a few comments. The Gemara says, in my study of that Yomi, a few things I ever got. The Gemara says that Jews had autonomy from the Second Temple for about 40 years. Then the Greeks inserted themselves in the political life and everything. So that's really, they had about 40 years of autonomy according to the Gemara, 38 to 40 years.
I mean, that kind of makes sense.
Okay, now, and so...
In the Persian period, yeah.
I saw in the Wall Street Journal, so that's one thing, but the Wall Street Journal had an article. So Darius, how did the Persian Empire fall?
Alexander the Great.
So, but there was a big battle about, and I traced it, it was in the Wall Street Journal review of a book, who tried to rehabilitate Darius, but the Greeks mocked Darius. They claim he fled the battle.
It's different Darius.
It's
a different Darius.
It's Darius.
Much later.
There were three Darius. The last Achaemenid king, great king of the Persian Empire, was also a Darius. Was also a Darius.
So I thought,
and Alexander spent several years chasing him across Asia, basically, because he was running away from him.
But he's the one who left the battlefield.
Yeah.
The Persians lost. Greeks took over power.
Yeah.
So I couldn't put that in when Alexander the Great came in, or maybe that was around the same time.
That was Alexander.
I traced it back from the destruction of Second Temple 69, AD, or how would we say?
C, 70, yeah.
About 69, 70. I went back 420 years, 70, figure out how it worked. So that's how I numbered it. The last thing is, so there's a Gemara, and actually I have this on my website, it's Megillah Yudal on the base, 11b, talks about Cyrus. And I guess there's two psukim, two verses that talk about the 70 years. One said it's from the start of the Babylonian Empire. One says it's from the destruction of the temple. So Marc tries to reconcile those two psukim.
Yeah.
So the first way to say, well, one's just a remembrance of going back, which was Cyrus's time. Second time was Darius. But there's a fascinating Gemara here. It made such an impact on me, I wrote about it. Rabbanit, son of Rabbi, gave the following exposition. And you really have to see the Hebrew inside, because it's, okay?
Please read it for us on the Hebrew inside.
I don't have the Hebrew.
Okay, where is it?
In my website.
Well,
where the
Gemara McGill, get off on the base.
I know it all by heart.
What is the meaning of the verse? Thus said the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, okay, whose right hand I have taken hold. So I guess he's my anointed. Now was Cyrus, so this is what Rabbanit, son of Rabbi, says. Now was Cyrus anointed as a king by the Lord? Was he anointed? Okay, let me read it again. Now was Cyrus the anointed, I guess I didn't read it right. Now was Cyrus anointed as a king by the Lord? Rather, what it means is that God said to the Messiah, again, so he's darshaning here, he's trying to explain it. He says to the Mashiach, I have a complaint on your behalf against Cyrus. So he's telling, so this is what the Gemara is saying. Okay, I have a complaint on your behalf against, do you have the Gemara? Did you find it yet?
I'm looking.
11b. Maybe 12a. Okay. And so I said, so God said, he shall build my house and gather my exiles. God actually appointed Cyrus, you will build my house and gather my exiles. This non-Jewish king is God wants him to do that. And all Cyrus said was, whosoever there is among you of all his people, let him go up to Yerushalayim. But he did not command everyone to return. His mission, according to Rav Huna, Rabbanit, was to actually be the one who built the second temple and bring the Mashiach. But he failed in his mission, which is fascinating when you look in terms of Zionism. That's what I'm writing, that according to the Gemara is saying is Mashiach comes through this non-Jewish king, because that's what God wanted. But
right, so to me what's fascinating about that is it's obviously it's a reworking of what the concept and the idea of a Mashiach. A Mashiach is anointed, and in the Tanakh calling him an anointed, what we're saying is that God has anointed him as king.
To bring Mashiach.
So, but that's the Talmudic rephrasing of in the Tanakh. It doesn't mean to be what we would say is a Messiah today. It just means he is anointed in the same way Saul was anointed in the same way David was anointed, chosen by God to be king. And even though this is a Gentile, not like Darius, he was not half pure, half impure.
Right.
He is fully impure. He is anointed in the sense that he has been chosen as king, and even though he is the Gentile king, he is supposed to lead the Jews back to Israel. Now the Gemara is going to take it those steps further of saying to bring the Mashiach, but that's not what it means in the Tanakh.
Okay, but again,
and that's fascinating. That's fascinating. 100%.
But what's fascinating is, so if you look at, so I wrote this in my writings. What was complaining against Zionism? That they're not Orthodox Jews, right? That was one of the complaints by the right wing. But here you have the Gemara saying, well, it comes through a non-Jewish king. So, okay. Then what's interesting also, Art Scroll in the first edition actually said Mashiach was supposed to come. Second edition, they took that out. So second edition, you saw a difference.
Okay, we should probably wrap this up. Right? Yeah, that's right.
I'll look for it.
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
for coming.
Thank you, everybody. So yes, the last advertisement, go to 929. We're happy to have you involved in the site, and thank you, everybody, for coming out. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're going to say we're here next week again?
2 weeks from now.
Oh, 2 weeks from now.
Because next week is supposed to be the city's.
Oh, wait, okay. So maybe Saturday. We'll see. We'll make a decision. It could be worse. If it's worse, it'll be over Zoom, yeah. And it's Rabbi Russo and Sarah Palmer.
Yes, on Dvorah.
Midnight Rosh Hashanah, yeah.